Um, we're gonna start off with following an agenda here, but before I begin, I would just want to say that in partnership in the spirit of honoring our First Nations children in Saskatchewan First Nations and in the province of Saskatchewan as well too, in the spirit of partnership, this has been a long time in the making in establishing a formal relationship between the Children's Advocates Office and First Nations in Saskatchewan through the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations. Um, Through this partnership, I think it's going to build dialogue for better services, ensuring better services for children in care, and also for preventing children from coming into care and returning children in care back to their families, to their communities, and to honoring their culture, their language, their linkages to their family and the communities that they come from. It's quite a joyous occasion when we have two of our leaders here. We have Vice Chief Dutch Edward Lara, and we have Bob Pringle, the Child's Advocates Office in Saskatchewan here. We also, sitting in front here of the Saskatchewan First Nations Family and Community Institute, which means a whole lot for the First Nations agencies here in Saskatchewan, as well as to the Ministry of Social Services, of who we have agreements with as well too. And also mentioning the Department of Indian Affairs as well too, for all the people that are involved in children and families here in Saskatchewan. So before we get into the actual events, I want to call up Vice Chief Dutch Lara.
Thank you. Thank you for the clap. Wasn't expecting that. Thank you, Raymond, for the introduction, and want to acknowledge, of course, our elders, Mr. and Mrs. Linklater, and our leaders that are here, our Children's Advocate, Mr. Pringle, and media and staff. First Nations and our non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters of Saskatchewan, as well as successive child advocates, ombudsmen, auditors, and many community-based organizations, have called for transformative change to child welfare. The FSIN continues to work diligently to make the dream of healthy children, healthy families, and healthy communities a reality, both on and off the reserve. In 2010, an independent review panel was established in Saskatchewan to review all aspects of child welfare. The panel's report was released in 2011 and produced 12 broad recommendations. Each of the 12 recommendations is critical for transformative change in Saskatchewan. Recommendations 1 and 2 are particularly relevant for First Nations child welfare in Saskatchewan. Recommendation number 1 called for fundamental change to the child welfare system in Saskatchewan and recognized the need for more prevention-based approaches to child welfare. And recommendation number 2 called for a deliberate and a planned transition of child welfare and prevention services to First Nation and Métis control. The province has resourced the FSIN to develop a First Nations child welfare framework, and their continued support for First Nations involvement is critical to the success as we jointly begin transformative change. The First Nations child welfare framework is informed by inherent and treaty principles in child welfare. The framework has prevention as its overall goal, to ensure children and families receive increased support services at the community level. The framework was developed with the assistance of First Nations Child and Family Services directors and our First Nations leadership at the community level. And the framework recognizes that First Nations children and families in Saskatchewan could be better served under a system that is culturally responsive, and the framework was approved by our leadership in the 2012 Spring Assembly. A First Nations and child and youth agenda has been developed, which represents a holistic approach to working with children and guides how the FSIN works on behalf of children. Our vision for child welfare in Saskatchewan is not only for the benefit of First Nations children and families. Our philosophy, our approach, and our beliefs are consistent with and often exceed best practices and fosters respect for children, families, and communities. Our hope is for all children to benefit from our approach to child welfare. First Nations want to ensure all citizens of Saskatchewan experience the Saskatchewan advantage. In order to accomplish this, we must ensure truly transformative change is enacted that includes substantial ownership by First Nations. As the FSIN and First Nations move ahead with our mandate for change, we are pleased to announce today another important step in reaching that goal. The FSIN and the Saskatchewan Advocate for Children and Youth are here to sign a letter of understanding this morning that will solidify our shared aspirations to keep our children safe, to foster a system that nurtures children and families, and to promote the rights of First Nations children and youth both on and off the reserve. The FSIN recognizes and supports the role of the mandate of the Advocate for Children and Youth in advocating and investigating matters affecting children and youth. As the majority of the office's clientele are First Nations children and youth, it is critical to ensure First Nations have meaningful input into the priorities of the office as it relates to systematic advocacy and investigations. The FSIN and the Advocate's Office have worked together since the inception of the Advocate's Office in 1994 and have a long-standing and positive relationship. This letter of understanding formalizes our working relationship as we seek to continue to collectively recognize, address, and resolve issues affecting First Nations youth and children. We have confidence in Mr. Pringle's continued oversight of his independent office to ensure the public and First Nations are made aware of emerging and current issues facing all children and youth in Saskatchewan. While there is much good work happening across the province, which needs to be highlighted and strengthened, we also need to know that what is failing our children in order to address the shortcomings of the current system. First Nations share the Advocate's call for a sustainable poverty reduction strategy and agree that this, along with other strategies to address social determinants of health, will mitigate the socioeconomic drivers leading to the families coming into contact with child care and the criminal justice system. First Nations believe in a child welfare system that focuses on prevention as its first priority and to keep children with their families and communities of origin wherever possible. This was promoted as a recommendation by Mr. Pringle as chair of the Child Welfare Review Panel. Yet the infrastructure to ensure this off and on reserve is particularly limited. I would like to take, of course, this opportunity to recognize those caregivers in the child family and the child welfare system that are doing an excellent job in caring for children despite the limited resources available. Many caregivers provide safe and loving homes and ensure children and youth have strong identities through access to their culture. First Nations in Saskatchewan also applaud the acknowledgement and fully agree with the statement by the Canadian Council of Child and Youth Advocates that the living conditions of Indigenous children and youth is the #1 human rights issue in Canada. We will build on common ground with the Advocate in areas such as Jordan's Principle, uninsured health benefits, and the inequitable funding First Nations receive for child welfare on the reserve. On behalf of the Indian Governments of Saskatchewan Health and Social Development Commission, I am honored to sign this letter of understanding between the FSIN and the Advocate for Children and Youth Mr. Bob Pringle.
Thank you, Chief. The next individual I'm going to be calling up is Mr. Bob Pringle. He's been extensively involved with delivering services to the public, including 10 years as a member of the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan and now as the Advocate for Children and Youth. He has worked with First Nations and Métis peoples as a social worker, manager, and Minister of Social Services, and has been involved with leadership roles with community agencies such as Habitat for Humanity, the Saskatoon Food Bank, Cosmopolitan Industries, the Saskatchewan Association of Independent Child Welfare Review Panel, tasked with the comprehensive review of child welfare in Saskatchewan. He has also served as the co-chair and facilitator of the Premier's CBU Summits and co-chair of the province's Task Force on Housing Affordability. So with that, I want to introduce and bring up Mr. Pringle.
Thank you very much, Raymond, and also for the introduction and also for the important work that you do and have done for many years. Your leadership is recognized by everyone. Special thanks to Maria and Walter Linklater for your prayers and for your guidance over the years. We were reminiscing earlier that we've worked together going back some 20 years in this province. And good morning, Vice Chief and leaders within the First Nations community and non-First Nations community, dear friends and our media friends. And it's important that you're here to get this message out on this historic day. Certainly want to express our appreciation. A number of our staff are here. We're very grateful. We're all in this together, as a number of your staff are here. So we want to acknowledge and appreciate the hard work and the leadership by you, Vice Chief, and all of your staff at the FSIN and all of our staff for their hard work and cooperation to bring this important day about. This letter of understanding is based on trust that the Chief referred to. It's based on respect, and it's based on the collaborative work that we're doing together. As a signer of some of the original agreements back in the early 1990s, mid-1990s, to set up the Child and Family Service agencies, and as having the opportunity to chair the Child Welfare Review, and now with the opportunity to be Saskatchewan's Advocate for Children and Youth, I'm keenly aware of the First Nations child and youth issues. As we are at our office, of course, the vast overrepresentation in the child welfare and the young offender systems of First Nations children and youth, which represents the vast majority of young people we work with, as the Vice Chief had indicated, as we try and work with the children and youth to navigate these complex systems that don't work for them very well. So we see the daily living struggles of children and young people in Saskatchewan who are First Nations, and we strongly believe, as I hope is evidenced by our input to this agreement today, that there must be a better way to serve these children, youth, and families. And this can only be achieved by working respectfully together with the FSIN, the First Nations agencies, the Métis organizations, with community members and government. Through positive relationships like this formal agreement and the open communication, we want to all work to ensure that First Nations children and youth have culturally tailored programs and services which they are fully entitled to by virtue of their rights. Just want to recommit myself to as Vice Chief Larot did, to the recommendation of the Child Welfare Review, the 12 recommendations, but I want to, including the fundamental change, as the Chief talked about, that creates a broad and large accessible prevention support stream and a much smaller formalized process where the courts are required. And I'm on record on many occasions over many years having said that First Nations children have a right to be in their own families, with their own parents, in their own communities, in their own speaking their own language, and raised in their own culture. And this is nothing less than that is acceptable. The second recommendation, the planned and deliberate transition to First Nations control of child welfare off reserve, including the strong and properly financed prevention support services, and a recognition, as the Vice Chief said, about the drivers. What drives this system that doesn't work for First Nations children, youth, and families and communities, and frankly for non-First Nations families, and that's all of the poverty-related conditions that exist, and these must be a priority. They must be addressed as a priority, and we're going to continue to say that with our First Nations friends. I want to commend the FSIN as well for the hard work you've done on the child welfare framework and your child and youth agenda, and commend all of the First Nation agencies and staff and boards and the volunteers as you work hard to keep families together and ensure that young children are brought up in the spirituality and the language of their culture. We look forward to many more productive conversations with the FSIN and you, Vice Chief, in the coming months and years as we all work to achieve meaningful and lasting change for First Nations children, youth, families, and indeed for communities. So it's a glorious day, an historic day, and I feel a lot of gratefulness, and I feel such hope for our future together. Vice Chief Larat and I have known each other for a long time, and I feel we see our visions are the same, and I feel very close to our First Nations brothers and sisters across this great province. I've traveled the province on many occasions back in the 90s and again during the Child Welfare Review, and since I've been the Children's Advocate. I've had the pleasure, for example, of spending a week on the Kiniston First Nation when I was the Minister of Social Services to try and learn as much as we could. Of course, I had the privilege of attending and being embraced and supported by the All Chiefs Assembly at Dakota Dunes. I've had the privilege of talking and meeting with many chiefs and elders over the years, and felt embraced everywhere I've gone. So it's a real honor to have that feeling of closeness, and I'm deeply honored to have been recently bestowed as an honorary, the treasure as an honorary member of the Sturgeon Lake First Nation. That's one of the entire highlights of my whole life. So let's move forward from here. Let's build on this important day. I'm honored to sign this agreement. I look forward to continuing to work together. And I want to say thank you to all the champions for children here and across this great province, champions of First Nations and non-First Nations. Our children deserve nothing but our best, and that's what we need to recommit ourselves here to today and always. And our children are precious. That isn't a cliche. Children are precious, and we need to keep that in mind as we're making decisions about their future. And I know that we continue to listen to our young people and our Youth and Care Network, and we'll continue to do so because I think the philosophy we have at the Children's Advocate Office, we had a name change, so I'm still getting used to it. It was the Children's Advocate Office. Now it's the Office for Advocate and the Advocate for Children and Youth Office. We will continue to listen to those who have the most at stake, as we should. So thanks again, and it's an honor to be here with you, Vice Chief, and all of our great friends.
Well, Bob, the last 30 years, this is the third time I've signed an agreement with you.
That's right.
Used to have black hair then.
Only 39. That's a job.
Again, I want to thank Bob and our chief for the good words. They both alluded to the top indicators of why children are in care in First Nations country, and through research and from part of our institute here as well too. The 4 top indicators of why children are in care is poverty, substance abuse, housing, and family violence. does this mean for Saskatchewan First Nations Child and Family Services? Ensures better programming to address these areas. To keep these children at home through the programs that we do have, we have 3 areas we focus on: protection, prevention, and partnerships. And today is a good day for partnerships. The best practices that are coming out of this, or will be coming out of this, is going to be very effective for First Nations agencies here in terms of effective practice. Sometimes you hear the term best practice. Well, what is an effective practice? So this is what this means for me as a Director of Child and Family Services today. So I'm very happy that our 2 people are coming together to form that alliance. So miigwech. So I want to call up our elder, Walter Linkletter, to come and say some words for us. And Maria.
Good morning to all of you. Very honored to be here this morning. We were given a gift to come, tobacco. And I think that's very important to understand, because elders have knowledge of spiritual, cultural solutions for our people and for all people. But we're prohibited by spiritual law to brag or about them until we're given tobacco and gifts. So we can speak freely about our culture now, because that protocol was followed. A lot of people don't know that. But it's good that we were given tobacco this morning. I know this is about child welfare, and the most important message I can give, and I understand quite well, is the relearning of our traditional inherent spiritual way of life. I was caught up as a result of the residential schools. I had to overcome many negative things in my life, and I was about in my middle 30s when I went back to the elders. And to me, that's what was missing in my life. I didn't know that we had a spiritual way to handle problems in life. So I really listened to them, and since that time, I've incorporated those spiritual principles in my life, and I've stabilized even in this modern technological world. And we incorporated those spiritual teachings with our family as well. We had 7 children, 2 of them I passed on, but we have 5 left, and 4 of those children, of our children, because of the spiritual teaching that we learned from the elders and which we passed on to them, are living a balanced spiritual way of life. So I think that would be about a 98% recovery rate, if we want to use mathematics. We've also kept over 400 children in our lives. And I was just thinking about some of them the other night, and I would say we have a high percentage of recovery in those children as well. They're all married now, and some of them are grandparents now. A few of them still keep in contact with us, especially with Maria. And then they always thank her for the spiritual teaching that we gave them. So we know from our own elders and from our own knowledge of the spiritual cultural principles that elders have, that this can be very successful. And that's what we have to do. The provincial government, the FSIN, this organization, all of us have to allow the elders to teach people how to live a good life. And it's your responsibility to allow us to do that, because that's one of the solutions. We have to learn how to balance that in this modern technological world. That's what elders are for. They'll help you to relearn and have our children and families relearn the spiritual power that exists, in our inherent spiritual way of life. So that's the message that I would recommend, to this organization and to FSIN, provincial governments, that we have to include elders and the inherent spiritual way of life that they know about to be incorporated or integrated in the individuals that work with children and in the organizations and in the children themselves. That's what's missing. Like all our grandchildren, we have about 25 grandchildren that we know of. And not one of them has ever been baptized in a church. They've all gone to the elders for their baptism. And they're doing well. They're doing well. And so that's what I mean when we say we have to try to understand and respect the teachings that elders have to help children and families. So that's the prayer I said this morning. Ask our Creator and Mother Earth and all the spirits around us to give us that courage to incorporate and integrate somehow. And that's the responsibility of this organization. How are you going to do that? But the elders are there to help you so that we can all learn the spiritual and inherent teachings of our ancestors. Chine namene bijawa kamana nongom. Aja mena ni kwech metawa kijamone to e wiche nan no indagna ki atma ke. Winge chine nam ne bijawa ma. Chime kwech mishoms. Ni we jo agane go.
Niistä kahkiokedena nanaskawana motsigissaga kahkioketattamskaat naawau. Kimi jogiskan senawanot. Homakape mamo pekape mamo ayak. Hawassa kotse. Nigan ekote katawa spaiki ko matsunoak. I'm grateful for this day. It's been a long time. For these ways to happen. But all along we've been helping ourselves, to look after our own children. And I always want to encourage the grandmothers to stand up and take charge, to take their grandchildren back home. When you see a woman stand up, a grandmother stand up, there's so much power in there, so much love that nobody can buy, no foster home can replace that. And we must have policies that are culturally appropriate to bring all our children back home. And we must be really serious about it, not just for today, but forever for the future. Because there's still lots of children that are stuck in care. People that have kept these children seems to have more of a priority to have them than the original parents. They talk about bonding. How are children going to bond when they only see their parents once a month, twice a month? We cannot use those ways. The longer a child stays away from the family, they change. Pretty soon they don't need each other. But also, when they start visiting each other, they just pick up where they left off. Nobody can ever destroy the cord that the child was hooked up to their mother. What Seapi we call that umbilical cord is so sacred. Nobody has the power to cut that. And when we keep children, we create leaders. We don't create followers. Followers end up in jail. So we have to find better ways to look after the children. And we must be listened to. The agencies have to listen to us. Because we hold power also as grandmothers. What we say must go. We're here for a purpose. We're not just grandmothers. We have so much to offer, so much to give. There's good foster homes, very good foster homes. And there's also foster homes that are not very good. Everybody knows that. These ways fall through the cracks. And it's up to us, to keep an eye on what's happening in our circle. We have to keep an eye on that, and we have to be very serious. But my hope is all the children to go home because somebody wants them. I have 2 grandchildren that are stuck in the system, and we're working on for the children to come home. But like I say, the system is only as strong as how we're going to let it be strong. And when we get involved, it's going to get weak, and we will have more power to have say about our children. They're on loan to us. Creator loaned us those children. And they also have a way of life. They have identity. And nobody can ever give them that, just us. So I want to say, help us bring all our children home. And if you can do that, then you're following what you just signed here. And hear us out as grandmothers, because we hold power. Kinanaskum tinawa kakyo, nanaskumon.
Ininge me goich ticket go eat the mook. Come on. Chanishna be. Okay, so I want to thank our elders, Walter and Maria, for the good words they've shared with us. At this time, I want to call up Bob. I think you have a gift you want to present to the chief. Huh? You want to sign it first? Okay. So I guess we're going to get into the signing now. You got the ceremonial pen there ready? Okay, Vice Chief Laura has signed. Now Bob Pringle is signing. Are you done? Okay, let's give a round of applause. Thank you.